Today's speaker is Chris Ciunci, Managing Partner at TribalVision. Chris founded TribalVision as a forward-thinking alternative to traditional marketing models, which I'm going to let him explain instead of me. He oversees TribalVision's strategic direction, guides the company's client-first philosophy, and spearheads its business development efforts. He's a graduate of Swarthmore College and Yale School of Management. And fun facts about Chris: he enjoys hitting the batting cages with his two sons, getting behind the wheel of a go-kart, and relearning his multiplication tables. Go figure. Please welcome Chris Ciunci.
Thank you. Thanks, Susan. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Susan, for having me here today. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Katie, and everyone that's organized this and giving me the opportunity to speak in front of a group of business owners and executives. As Susan said, we don't have much time, so I don't want to spend much time at all on myself. The only thing I'll say to hopefully give this a little bit of credibility is that I did start TribalVision about 7.5 years ago. Been working with probably over 100 business owners, probably 150 business owners at this point over those years, helping them improve their growth prospects of their business. And so those 7.5 years, close to 8 years now, has been a lot of learning that has been done in the trenches that I thought I'd want to share, because I think I have a unique perspective, arm in arm, really trying to help oftentimes business owners who have stagnated try and figure out how they're going to grow. And what I learned in these 7.5 years is it's much more than a typical marketing tactic that every business owner initially comes to me for, right? So they would say, okay, Chris, you know what? We've stagnated at $5 million in sales now for the last few years, or we're growing at only 5%. Our competitors are growing at 20%. I need some marketing help. I'm thinking about rebranding. I'm thinking about putting together an e-newsletter and a tip of the month that can happen with an email drip campaign. I need to do some paid search. I know I need social media help. And what we find is once we get in and we actually dig in a little bit and do our discovery of these companies, we realize that it's far more important to have a lot of other things happening at that organization than just a standard e-newsletter or a standard email drip campaign. So this isn't going to be about, okay, what's the latest and greatest that's going on in social media today with stats and with tips that you can bring back with you on the nitty-gritty of how to run a social media campaign. I leave that to all the other marketing books, and there are plenty of them out there. What this is really just about is sort of a more blue-collar way of thinking about how to grow your business that I've learned over 7.5 years. So again, Susan mentioned I have two sons. If I were to write a book for my sons to say, okay, you're thinking of starting a business, what advice can I impart on you from the years that I've spent with business owners that you can't read in a textbook, but that is so intangibly important to actually grow your business? This is what this book tries to achieve. Okay? This is a bad slide because you should never have this much content on a slide. This is directly from the book, but I want to read this to you because this really encapsulates what this book is all about. And trust me, there won't be another slide that looks like this. In my experience, I found that the growth of a company typically has less to do with traditional marketing tactics and more to do with initiatives outside of the standard definition of marketing. It used to be that business owners would think to themselves, since I need to grow, let me hire a couple people and they can take care of that for me. My marketing department will recommend such and such tactics, which will help us achieve such and such results if we employ them. Marketing has evolved, however, and organizations need to change their mindsets. From my perspective, marketing is no longer something done by one department. Rather, it now includes every department and every customer interaction. Your company itself is a marketing engine, and breaking down the walls inside an organization can ensure that everyone plays a role. This approach optimizes your team, your technology, and your culture so that everyone is fully focused on the needs of your customers and on structuring the right processes to address your customers' pain points. So what I'm trying to achieve here with this short book that I've written is ultimately you've got to be thinking about marketing no longer as this is something that a CMO does or even a 3-person department does. I've been in those situations for years. And if that is the attitude of an organization, it's typically never going to be achieving the potential that it can achieve if everyone is included and being thought of as a marketer. I mean, there's a seminal article by McKinsey years ago, 3 or 4 years ago now, called "We're All Marketers Now." And really cutting-edge business owners today are thinking that way. My company is a marketing engine. The person that's answering the phone is a marketer for me, right? It's not just about a tagline and a logo, right? I've dealt with a lot of committees dealing with a rebrand, and yet somehow it doesn't disseminate down to everyone in the organization, right? So to me, that's never going to reach its potential if not everyone's involved figuring out their role in this rebranding effort, as an example. Okay, I've broken down the book into several chapters. Again, since I know I'm limited on time, but for about 30, 40 minutes, I'm just focusing on, I think, hopefully the most practical tips that I can give the room today. Okay, so there are more. If you'd like, again, you can go to marketinginthetrenches.com. There's a landing page there. You can download this for free. Okay, you can just give me your business card. I can email you this, and I have physical copies if you wanted one as well. Okay, so let's first just start with what I feel are the most relevant tips for at least a customer. So number one, know your customer. Sounds very basic again, right? And so every time I speak to a business owner, we do our discovery and we say, okay, the first question I have is, who is your customer? Do you know your customer? Of course I know my customer. I've been in business for 15 years. Don't insult me. I know my customer a heck of a lot better than you do. And they do, right? But once we start to really engage more and start asking more and more questions, we realize that, yes, they know the demographics of their customer and they know who they are and the industry they're in, but they really don't understand enough about their buying behavior and enough about even just the different subsegments of customers that they really have. And so, again, I've got to breeze through these a little bit, but you've got to make sure that you've got to first figure out, how are they even considering purchasing your product? Where does that awareness come from? And where can you start thinking about inserting yourself into that conversation before they even become a customer? And so when I ask a lot of those questions, they don't have many answers. And sometimes they do, but oftentimes it's, well, I don't know if they're online. I don't know about the journey that they go through with my brand. I just know that they're a purchasing agent that's buying widgets from me that is typically a 55-year-old male who goes to trade shows 3 times a year, right? But know that, knowing your customer can be much more sophisticated. So for some of our clients, what we do is we develop customer personas. So if you don't have if there's a takeaway from this slide is if you don't have a persona of your customer, you should really try and develop one. So what do I mean by that? We've worked with a jewelry manufacturer now for a couple years. They're in New Mexico. And this woman actually is very big on QVC. You probably have heard of her name. And she was really, again, not understanding why is it that I'm driving a lot of traffic through QVC but not through my own website. What can I be doing to promote myself more than just through QVC? And she felt like it was just a woman who was 45 years of age who ended up having disposable income to buy her bangle bracelet for $100. And that's her customer. Once we finished that process, she actually realized she has 5 very distinct personas. And they are women. There's very few men that are in that persona for her. But they're very, very distinct in why they're actually buying from her, right? So there's a distinct group that we found that were buying just because all of the bangles are made in the United States. And that's huge for them that it was made in the U.S. and they were proud of that. There are others that we call fashionistas that could care less that it was made in the United States. They just wanted to make sure that they're being able to share this with their friends and expressing themselves through this bangle. It's a piece of affordable luxury. There's another persona that they were just really happy they were sort of friends with this woman, Carolyn, right? I'm friends with Carolyn, right? And very, very different reason why there's a bond to that company. Okay, so once we went through that, we then were able to message appropriately with the right assets and channels so that we're really bonding even further with very, very distinct segments, which on the surface, there was just one customer. It's just a woman who's 45 who has a lot of money, who has a household income of $150,000. Right, so all I can say is I just want to challenge everyone in the room, if you can, just think about who your customer is and dig a little deeper, because you can probably be much more targeted with your marketing efforts and your messaging efforts once you figure that out. I mentioned this a little bit about about the customer decision journey in the last tip, right? So I want you to think about marketing. If there's, again, another practical nugget for the room is think about the marketing model now as a journey that a prospective buyer has with your brand. That's what cutting-edge marketing is today. It's no longer the sales funnel, right, where ultimately it's, okay, let's throw in as many leads as we can in this big funnel, and then after we hit them over the head enough, there's going to be maybe 4 or 5 that come out of the 50 every single month. Okay, that's completely changed, right? I'm stealing this, right? So Seth Godin, if you don't know Seth Godin, Seth is, he speaks about this. Okay, if you don't know Seth, you should definitely Google Seth, and he's probably written 25 books on business and marketing. He's a thought leader that's a much stronger thought leader than me at this point. Okay, but I'm stealing from this because I've learned in my 7 years that business owners don't think this way. And our entire process that we work on with our customers is about this journey. So think of it as putting a sales funnel on its side. That's what marketing is today. Right? So really strong marketing is not nearly as much about interrupting someone in this funnel and trying to get them through and have your salesperson get a hold of them. It's let's turn it on its side and let's think about where is someone actually originally thinking about that they have a pain point. And from there, how are they then researching that? And from there, how are they then making that decision where you can insert yourself in all of those potential touch points? Okay, so marketing today is a journey with your brand, and it doesn't stop with when they purchase from you. That's just the beginning, right? It then extends beyond, of course, when you actually have them as a customer. Okay, but you've got to be thinking of marketing today more as a journey with your brand than it is about anything else. And this is the second half of that journey, wowing your customers, right, is, okay, we have this journey that we've talked about. A process that I'd want you to go through with your companies is this. You go back to your office and you say, okay, from what Chris just said, let's brainstorm and think of every touch point a prospect has with my brand, both online and offline. You first have to know your customer, right? So that's why it's the first tip. But once you've learned that, you can then say, okay, how can I strengthen whether it's awareness of me, of myself in that decision, or in this case, while your customers, after they've purchased from you, what can you be doing to actually strengthen that bond? And again, if I talk to a business owner, they'd say, oh no, we're client focused, we got it. But then once we start asking a lot more questions, we then uncover with their team, it's not us being brilliant here, we're brainstorming with their team, probably 15 more touch points that they could be having with that customer to wow them, which isn't happening. So what's an example so I can make it practical? Right, so clients of TribalVision, if they become a client, they get a personalized thank you note from myself, thanking them for the opportunity, and then they get their 3-person team who's also doing something very similar, saying we're going to really work our butts off to make sure we're exceeding your expectations. Handwritten, it's not an email. That's a bit of a wow, in my opinion. Right? Or if we're talking about someone who's shipping something, a widget to someone, and they're in charge of shipping, they're following that up with a quick phone call saying, just want to make sure that this arrived on time. I know it's important for you. Did that happen? That's a touch point. That's far more important. Those little touch points that you can find in your company are far more important than, my God, I've got a sexy looking logo now. I'm excited. This is marketing. Right? Because it's not marketing at the end of the day, right? It's the surface of marketing. Right? Because I used to work for a bank, and I'm going to be crude for a second to make a point. I used to work for a bank. I was a CMO of a bank that we had about a $12 million marketing budget, so it was a big bank. And it was a family-run business, so that was fun. And just know that there were sons in the business. And one of the sons was a Madison Ave guy, and he knew everything about branding. And his father was the one who built the business. And he went on probably for 6 months about a redesign of the logo, a redesign of the tagline, what should the tagline be, to the point where it completely disrupted business, because that's all he wanted to talk about. Until finally his father said, Kevin, I don't care if we call this shit bank. We're still going to make this work, because if we do our job properly and everyone in this organization knows how to really make a customer happy, it doesn't matter even if we're called shit bank. Now that's an exaggeration, of course. A name is important, right? I spent a lot of time on the name TribalVision, so I want to make it clear. I'm not just saying branding is not important. Okay, of course not. But just know that ultimately that logo and tagline that you've come up with, feeling so creative, is only a symbol of how you actually treat a customer. Right? So I just ordered some wood for my house from Lowe's. Right, and they talk about we care and their marketing and so forth. The guy came, he just dumped it on my driveway. I asked him, could you just bring, no, I got to go to the next one. So now every time I see that tagline with Lowe's and see their brand, I get furious. So I don't care how good their creative department is, they've lost. Right, and that's how it is today, especially with millennials. So my point is, if you can, think about every touch point that your company can have with the customer. Okay, and don't just say, oh no, we're doing that. And brainstorm, are there 10, 15, 20 touch points that you can start having that you're not having today? And I would say that we can find at least 10 if we were to come together on that. Okay, so marketing today is about a journey with your brand, and it's about strengthening that journey in every way possible and putting a process in place so that happens. Right, so everyone, again, says, okay, yeah, no, we've done this, we've done that. Yeah, but is there a process so it continues? Right, it's automated so it continues to happen. It's not just like the flavor of the month. We're going to come up with some great ideas, and then you ask in 6 months and they're not doing any anymore. right? You've got to put a process in place to make sure that happens. Storytelling. So here's another chapter of the book talking about telling a story. Again, I'm going to sound a little negative here, but it's me to try and learn from the mistakes that I've seen with business owners that I've worked with for years, right? It's, again, I'm telling my son, this is how you build a business. This is how you're going to try and grow a brand. This is how you market, okay? Storytelling is really important. So if someone were to ask me, what is marketing today? I'd have a lot of answers, actually. It's not just one, right? Some really smart people out there say it's caring. Marketing is caring. That's what marketing is. In the most simplistic fashion, it's caring. Right? So that's one definition. I'll give you many today, right? Another is the decision journey, right? The consumer journey is another. This is another, right? Is storytelling, right? A lot of times when we've worked with business owners, they say, okay, I need to redesign my website because I want to bring it to the next level, which is great. But they completely forget the fact that, yeah, but what about telling a story on that site and in your materials that actually means something? So it's not just talking about the benefits of your product, but you're actually getting to the story behind why you're doing what you're doing. One practical tip from this you can bring back. If you don't know Simon Sinek, you should, right? He's an amazing marketer that came up with a video that went viral called The Power of Why. Millions of hits now. And there's a reason there's millions of hits, because he hit it on the head. That oftentimes if I ask a client, okay, so what is it that you do? Oh, it's easy. That's an easy answer. Right? How do you do it? Oh, let me show you the factory floor and let me show you everything. It's amazing how we do it. Why do you do it? Why do we do it? It's a tough answer sometimes for people to answer that question. Same thing with the team. Why are we here? Why are we doing what we're doing? Is it something that's going to engage someone who's thinking about buying my product? And especially with millennials today, they care about the why far more than about the what and the how. Right, so if nothing else, challenge yourself when you're thinking about your message. You should be telling a compelling story. And I don't care if it's a widget. We can find a way to make you different from somebody else. Right? We deal with the largest septic cleaning company in New England. It's tough to talk about that, right? I mean, my God, how do we differentiate that? Right? We've spent a lot of time thinking about how we're different and our why, right? Why we come to work every day. And help our clients versus our competitors. And most of those competitors are not thinking the way that we are. So there's some big wins that can happen. Okay, so thinking about storytelling. Practical again, so how do you tell a story? If you don't have a video on your website right now telling that story, I'd recommend that you try and find the budget to be able to talk about your company story, right? In an engaging way, because no one's going to read content anymore. Right? No one's going to, if you think that, again, dealt with one company recently where the CEO is proud of herself because she's like, yeah, I just wrote, look at all this great content. I've just spent like the last 2 weekends writing all of this, which is great, but I then had to break the news, like, no one's going to really read all of that. You will, because you're obsessed with this, but someone's not. They have an attention span of maybe 30 seconds. So how can we make this digestible? Telling a story through video is going to make that far more compelling. So that's just one example of telling a story properly. You can also have your customers, by the way, tell a story for you, right? You should have client video testimonials. So if you're selling into 3 different verticals, right, it's far easier for me when I sell to say, don't listen to me. I'm the sales guy. Listen to my customers. So I have a nonprofit vertical with 4 customer video testimonials. I have one for manufacturing, one for professionals, several for professional services, et cetera, right? So have others tell your story as well. But telling that story is a big part of marketing today. And that brings us to content, right? So content, again, another definition of marketing is all about content, right? So just be aware that a lot of great brands, look at Netflix, they built their business on great content. Okay, that's why the HBOs of the world are all of a sudden a bit in trouble versus the Netflixes of the world. It's about content. Again, for that septic cleaning company, you can say, how the heck are we going to write content? We have written content. We've come up with content calendars every single month. We're talking about the 10 tips to clean out your septic so you don't have to use us. There's a ton of ways to be providing content. But nowadays, marketing is about, and I'll talk about in a second, pulling people in, not pushing out with interruption-based marketing. Okay, and if you're going to pull someone in, you sure as heck had better have some relevant, fresh content that someone wants to read so that they give you permission to market them by providing you with their email address or their contact information to build up your email database, right? So again, another thought in terms of, well, what is marketing? Today it's all about content and unique content. Okay, another chapter of the book is all about new media. So here's another way to think about, so I'm giving you a lot of frameworks today to think about marketing. Okay, we talked about storytelling, we talked about content, we talked about the consumer decision journey. Here's another, right? You should be thinking of it as owned, earned, and paid media. Okay, so what is that? Again, years ago, McKinsey came up with this. That's now been accepted really by the marketing world, right? Everyone knows owned, earned, paid in my circle, my narrow little circle, right? So I just thought this room should know owned, earned, paid, right? So everyone thinks about paid marketing, right? Paid media. That's traditional marketing. It's television, it's print, it's radio, right? It's Google paid search. You're paying to interrupt someone with your message, right? And oftentimes I talk to business owners where they say, marketing sucks. I've lost a lot of money with marketing. I'm not going to market, right? Unless you can guarantee me an ROI, I'm smart. I'm not going to market because it's not worked for me. And they're right. It hasn't worked for them because they have only thought about in the last 10 years paid ways, shortcut ways to get in front of someone. They haven't thought about owned. What is owned? Owned is your website. It's all of your marketing assets. It's your message. It's the videos that I talked about. It's your email drip campaigns, right? And the content that's in there and the template and what it looks like. It's your LinkedIn campaigns. I can go on, right? But it's what you can build, the moat that you're building around your brand every day, your assets. That's owned. And oftentimes business owners, because they feel like they have to see an ROI, do not invest in owned. And they wonder then when they go to paid why it's not working. Because they're average. They're just like everybody else. You got a crappy website, you got a crappy landing page from a paid search campaign that's not optimized with a great message that's targeted to exactly what someone's looking for, your marketing is going to suck, right? But it's sort of having to get over that cliff of, well, okay, I've got to be thinking of marketing as then an investment that I'm going to then take a risk on a little bit and develop those assets, that own part of my business that no one likes to deal with because it costs money. Right? First thing I did when I started TribalVision was I put together a video. So I had 1 year to start a business, right? I don't have a ton of money. I don't have a rich mom and dad. I didn't have any banking friends. They could give me bank debt, right? So you would think, that's a little insane. So you have a year to do this. You got 2 kids and a mortgage, and you're busy focusing on a video? Get your ass out there and start selling. But I knew the importance of how a differentiated message in this crowded marketplace of marketers who are all commoditized selling the same thing is going to work out, not very well. So I did invest in that. I invested in a website, not a little rinky-dink website. Take a look, not to brag, but take a look at the TribalVision website. There's hundreds of pages of content over the years. Right? It's done for a business reason because I know it's going to pay off. We have 17 client video testimonials on our website. I'm 7 years young, not 15. Okay? You can at least start with 3 or 4 videos. But the point is, focus on owned. It's going to pay off when you have to think about paid. Earned marketing, right, is think of it as, in this room, we should be thinking of it as like, honestly, it's like customer referrals. Right? How can you earn their trust to say, you know what, I had a wow experience with this company. I need to recommend them. Or, hey, can you do me a favor? I'm trying to close this deal. Do you mind getting on the phone for 15 minutes? Of course I will. You guys have just completely, ripped the cover off the ball for us. Right? It's earned. Right? Another example, though, is, the Old Spice commercial, right? Social media, there's a ton of earn that can happen. Most of us, including me, don't have those budgets to put together that type of viral Old Spice video. That being said, I will say, if you know Dollar Shave Club, that gentleman started Dollar Shave Club on a video that went viral. He went all in on trying to come up with something great. He did it, right? But that's 1 in a million, to be frank. Don't say I'm going to go back and put together a viral video, especially if you're B2B. You're going to be disappointed. My point is, you've got to think about earned, but earned isn't going to happen unless you have owned. Right? Because again, no one, as Seth Godin says, no one talks about average. Average is a losing strategy, right? Especially today where everything is going viral, with people wanting to express themselves about what a great experience they've had with the brand. Okay, so think about owned, earned, and paid. View your website as your online storefront. Again, very basic, but I'm hoping I'm giving you some practical examples here. So I'll use a friend of mine as an example. So he has a manufacturing plant. And it's a family-run business, and boy, it's an amazing facility. I mean, you can eat off the floor, and they're so proud of it, as they should be. Right? It's been around for about 30 years. Right? They love to bring people through. But then you look at their website, and it looks nothing like the pride that they have in their factory floor. And then I tell them, do you see the visitors that are coming to your website, even just by accident? There are probably 50 times more visitors coming to your website than there are that are actually coming in your door of your factory. As an example, why aren't you focusing more time there? right? It just is a mindset shift, right? But you've got to make sure with that website, right, that you've got to bring it to the level where if it's not to the credibility of your storefront itself, it should be pretty close. And if anything, it should be far better. You should be spending more time on that website. I know my friend Andrea there likes to hear that because, again, he does web design in a very, very solid way, right? But the point is, you've got to start thinking about your website as more important than your physical facility. So what are some practical tips, very quickly, okay, for your website to at least make it credible? If I take a look at your website on my phone and it's loading slowly, or it's a bad experience because it's not what's called responsively coded for that small of a device, then you feel like you're in the 1980s to me, and to every millennial. Okay? You've got to get to the point, and by Google, by the way, because they'll penalize you for that now. Okay, so if nothing else, the takeaway with your website is make sure it's responsively designed and coded. And it's not expensive to do, to be frank. Okay? There are now templates that you can get, right, off of a shelf that already have templates designed and coded for every device. And it's not expensive. So my point is make sure at least you have a good experience taking place. It loads quickly, okay? And make sure, again, as we've talked about, if nothing else, you've got to have a bit of a different message on that website that can differentiate you. One other point I guess I just make here, if there's anything else I'd say that's important, if you're not looking at Google Analytics, you can just place a piece of code on your website where you can actually start tracking the number of unique visitors every single day, every single month, and you're not looking at that monthly, you should be. Okay, so again, it's simple. You can go onto Google, do a tutorial with Google if need be. It's very simple. Find yourself a coder if you don't feel comfortable at all. They can place that snippet of code on your website for you and can now start seeing everything that's happening on your website. Because when I ask a business owner, great, so what's going on with your website? I don't know what's going on. What do you mean? I don't know. Right? So if you can, just try and at least get to that level where you're like, okay, I have 1,000 unique visitors this month. Now let's set quantifiable goals. How are we going to get to 2,000 visitors in 6 months? And how's the marketing team and everyone here going to help me get there? Okay, so again, you're flying blind if you're not putting any type of analytics tracking on your website. Technology. Again, just a couple quick tips about technology. Just know that nowadays there's I'm just going to focus on sort of two pieces, right? Which is called CRM, which is Customer Relationship Management, and CMS. Okay, which is content management systems, right, where there's an automation piece to that, where you can automate your marketing. So let's talk about automation first, and then we'll get to CRM. Okay, so I love automation. Marketing, it's called marketing automation. Okay, and what it is it allows me to be bigger than I really am. Okay, it allows me to touch, 50 times, 100 times more people than if I ever wanted to try to do it manually. So there are, and again, Andrea has platforms that he's built proprietarily of his own that he has, which are fantastic. There's also, though, again, off the shelf from even MailChimps of the world. If you know MailChimp with email, they are now coming up with an automation piece where you can put drip email marketing campaigns together, right, where you sort of can set it and forget it, where you're like, okay, I used to work at a bank. I'll give an example of automation. Someone comes onto my website, and I put tracking on properly so I know that someone's clicking on home equity loan versus someone else is clicking on refinance. Okay, the person who's clicked on refinance, they're going to go down a path with my automated drip email marketing campaigns, one a month or however much you want to be in front of someone, where they're just getting tips and testimonials and whatever it might be that's talking to refinancing their mortgage. They don't care about home equity loans. And if they do, there'll be something at the bottom of that drip where they then do and will go down a different path, right? Whereas the home equity loan person is going to be getting everything that they need to educate them about the home equity business. Okay, the point is you're able to then get in front of, I have an email list of 6,000 names at this point, I'm able to then set up drip campaigns up front, which I can tweak, of course, where I know that with my assistant, we're going to be in front of those 6,000 names, and in a bifurcated way depending on what they clicked on with my past email or on my website. Okay, that's called That's a very simple way of saying marketing automation. There's far more to it, of course. There are other, everyone probably has heard of HubSpot in the room. Okay, HubSpot has a tool. Okay, and HubSpot's a publicly traded company, so trust me, there's a ton of demand for this stuff. Okay, they've coined the term inbound. Another example, again, I'm agnostic because the way that we're compensated by our clients is just for our time, so we're not HubSpot resellers. There's some positives to HubSpot in my opinion, and there's some negatives. Okay, but there are a lot of tools that are coming out right now that enable you to touch a lot more people than you were ever able to just 5 years ago. CRM, very quickly, customer relationship management software, that's like Salesforce.com. Okay, a tidbit I'll give you is, for most businesses in this room, I don't think you need it. Okay, there are other platforms that we use, like Zoho, Z-O-H-O is one, right, where you're not having to be paying money for a Cadillac that you're probably not going to be using properly, because you need someone dedicated to really be a Salesforce.com expert to really get as much out of that type of software as you can, right? So there are other tools that you can use, like Zoho being one of them, where it's in, that's what we use at TribalVision as an example, where it's a very easy way for your sales force, right, to be managing their own contacts and for them to then be tied in directly to your marketing campaigns. So if there's a good lead that comes in, right, a high quality, high scored lead, it can flow right into the CRM. So they're speaking to each other. So marketing and sales, right, between the automation piece and the CRM piece now can somewhat be like one well-oiled machine with reporting, et cetera, that can happen, okay? So if there's anything, if we're talking about technology, big picture for your businesses, you should be thinking about those two pieces. Another tip, just to throw it out there, is when you can, I mentioned this with Google Analytics, just make sure that you're measuring everything that you can. Okay, and I use a really funny sort of analogy, because I feel this way, is marketers that I speak with at organizations oftentimes aren't given the respect that they're deserved. Okay, but sometimes they do it to themselves because they're not equipped with data, right? And they're not equipped with anything quantifiable that a CEO or a CFO or a COO can then say, I get it. You spent this, and this is what we got in return, right? So, and again, this has happened over years now, but so this is nothing new, but I use the analogy of sort of the kiddie table at the Thanksgiving and the adult table, right? I was at the kid table for a long time. The adult table was taken, right? The CMOs of a lot of companies, the marketing heads, are still at that kiddie table. They're not at the bigger table, or at the adult table, oftentimes because they're not equipped with data. So you should be putting together, if you can, what are the key performance indicators that we can track to our business that can then say to someone that's a CEO, we spent this is what we did, I've tracked it back, these are the results. And all of a sudden, if you do have that closed loop in your business, you can then really start to see the power of marketing if done properly. And now all of a sudden, not only do you have a seat at that table, you're one of the most important people because you're the seat that actually drives growth. Right? Peter Drucker said, if you know Peter Drucker, he's the godfather of modern day management, not just marketing. Right? He said there's just two profit centers of a company. Everything else is expense. Innovation and marketing. Because without either of those, you don't have a customer. Right? But oftentimes companies that I work with, they don't think of it that way. They think of it as it's an expense. But ultimately, without a customer, you don't have anything. Right? Top line growth solves a lot of pain, as I always say. Right? So if you can, just make sure that you're quantifying your efforts, you're putting things in place, and there are tools digitally out there where you can easily have a dashboard of 8 to 10 KPIs that you can be reviewing with the executive team, or if you are the executive team, reviewing on a monthly basis. Okay? You have a lot of opportunity to have just as much respect as the CEO. So I'm just going to get to a couple more tips, and then we'll open it up for some questions. Okay? This is a pet peeve of mine. This I think I feel most strongly about. And again, it's so basic again, right? But again, I'm telling my son, you're starting a company, this is what you have to do if you want to achieve dramatic growth. It's not about the perfect e-newsletter. It's about these types of tips, right? So this one is the most important. Right? I can't tell you the number of times where my partner and I in the early days, right, we would take anything, right? We're just trying to build a business. It's just the two of us. We have like 40 people now. Right? But back in the day, it was just the two of us. Okay, you have a heartbeat, you need some marketing help, we'll help you. Okay, and what we found when we took those types of opportunities sometimes was we then start our discovery process, and we realize when we get back in the car after the discovery, there's no way in hell this is going to work. We're going to come up with and work our butt off to come up with the perfect marketing strategy for this company, and we're proud of it. But it's not going to work. Because the people in the room that we were actually speaking with were either not engaged, not qualified, didn't care. Right? So if you have a team that really doesn't really embrace marketing and see the power of what can happen, I would not invest in TribalVision. I wouldn't invest in a marketing plan. You're wasting your money. right? Because ultimately, if you're not surrounded by the right people who are the ones that are going to be executing this plan and going to be the ones that are bringing it forth to your own clients, right? If they're not on board, then my time is useless. Okay, so just know that, and it sounds basic again, right? But what we do at TribalVision, for example, is again, we have a team of about 40 people now. It's getting up to a size where we really have to automate some things. There's a lot that we're doing to put process in place. Number one, to make sure that our team is engaged. Because I don't know if you know, but 2/3 of employees are not engaged today in America. 2/3 are not engaged. And if they're not engaged, there's no way that marketing plan is ever going to reach its potential. So you can put process in place, right? So we have, for example, internal newsletters that we have take place at TribalVision, for example, right? So everyone's on the same page. We have surveys that go out and gauging where they are with our company and their engagement level. What can we be doing better? We have happy hours. We have annual retreats. We have a ton that we do to make sure that everyone knows the why that I talked about earlier, and everyone's rowing in the same direction, right? So you should be thinking about that, of course, for your own companies. Oftentimes, business owners are so focused on certain things, they're sort of not thinking about that piece enough. And they're thinking, like I said earlier, let's hire a marketing whiz, let's hire a marketing department. That's what we're going to do to grow next year. But they're forgetting about the bigger picture of the team. Right, so if you can, just think about what process, again, can you put in place to make sure you have those A players around you, right? Look at Bill Belichick. He just got rid of Collins, right? It's amazing. Everyone thinks that Bill Belichick is a god, right? And he is in a lot of ways. But oftentimes I see business owners where they don't think about that for their own teams. They just marvel at what they're doing at the New England Patriots, right? Whereas it's their own team that should be far more important on trying to put the right team in place. So Guy Kawasaki, another sort of thought leader, I'll end with this. He said, the power of A players, right? A players hire A players, right? If you hire a B player is going to hire a C player because they're insecure. And a C player is going to hire a D player until finally you have Z, right? So if you can, you've got to be thinking about, maniacally about, forget about just the marketing strategy and the tactics. You've got to make sure you have the right people, not just with the right skill set, but also with the right customer-centric mentality who honestly believe in this to make it happen. Because if they don't genuinely believe in the mission of being customer-centric and creating these wows and telling a story, and they roll their eyes at that, then they're probably never going to bring this to fruition. So with that, I will stop. Again, there's like 20 other tips, but you can certainly, like I said, either talk to me afterwards or there's a microsite, marketinginthetrenches.com, where you can download the whole book. So I can open it up, I guess, for maybe 5 minutes of questions, Susan?
Yep.
So what questions do we have? Does anything resonate with the audience? Or yes? Yeah, I would say, again, I don't want to say there's a perfect marriage, but I'll just, again, use me as the example, right? Because it's easy to do, because I'm the marketer for TribalVision. Okay, so I know that I kept talking about all these videos that we've done. If you look at our site, there's almost a video on every single page, right? But in addition to that, to your point, there's a ton of content that we're also producing, because there are certain channels, like LinkedIn as an example, right? Where LinkedIn is also going to video a bit, but trust me, there's a whole content calendar that we've put together for our own firm where we're leveraging like white papers, case studies, right? Results that's content, right? So, because a lot of times, and again, I track everything, a lot of those white papers are generating leads for me because it's a valuable content that you're not going to be able to get just with a 30-second video clip. So there is that marriage between the two. So I don't want to come across as video is it. And that's why there are companies, Fortune 500 companies, they have content teams. Right, and that's why the big are getting even bigger, and the smaller, it's a very difficult disadvantage that they're at, even from an SEO perspective. Because even from a search engine optimization, organic search, Google is making sure that you're writing relevant content, not just video, content all the time, so that they know that you're going to be relevant for that search term. Right, but the problem is, you're busy running your business, what the heck do you do, right? How do you have time? And should the CEO be blogging every day? Probably not, to be frank. Right, so you've got to find maybe outsource solutions to someone like yourself that we use. I'm not writing all of my content, by the way. Right, so what do? Here's another practical tip, right, is whether you outsource it to a company, or I have 3 interns from Brown University that I leverage where I give them bullet points as to what I want to talk about in a white paper, and then from there they're bringing it to 80% to where it needs to be, and then I'm putting the finishing touches on it on a Sunday night. Right, that's my content, right, because I'll be on, again, a CEO shouldn't be spending a lot of time on just developing content. They should be thinking about bullets. They should be thinking about ideas of what content should be out there, but shouldn't be writing it. But yeah, that's why I said that tip, Miss, right, in terms of content is king. It's not just video, it's certainly content as well. And content, by the way, can also take the form of landing page content. I mean, there's so much when we're talking content. But without content, if a business is not producing enough content or any content, and that's usually the case, I'd say 80% of people in this room probably aren't producing any content, there are ways that you can do it in a cost-effective way where that is going to bring you sort of more to the cutting edge of where marketing needs to be. So the really smart organizations, and there are many that we deal with, but the smart of the smart, what they do, and I'm just going to give a couple examples. One is how we can relate to this. Whether it's us or whether it's your own internal team putting together a marketing strategy. Okay, I'll use TribalVision. We present a marketing strategy to a firm, and it's usually just to the executives, right? 5 people in a room. And they say, yes, great, let's move forward. And the smart ones say, time out, we're not moving anywhere yet until we now put an abridged version or the full version together for our entire team. So that everyone then hears where we're going, who we are, what we're doing, and where we're going, and what role each one plays in this strategy, in this plan. And that's a perfect opportunity when you put something together, like the beginning of the year or December, this is what we're doing for 2017. You put that process in place again, where you have the entire team come together, and you have different locations and get it on Skype or GoToMeeting or whatever it might be. But again, truly marketing-centric organizations are thinking that way. They're not thinking you have 5 people in a room and great, here's our strategy, now let's start doing it. Well, wait a minute. The head of sales doesn't even know what we're doing. Don't you think the head of sales should know our new message and positioning and what we're doing next month and how it affects how he's interacting with clients? And so that's one example that's one. 2 is I mentioned that we have retreats at least at TribalVision, right? So we have 2 retreats a year because we don't want to do overload, okay? And it's expensive, right? Because we go, like, we rent a lodge in Vermont, right, for a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a lot of fun. But there's a day where we're just focusing in that retreat on this is where we are, this is where we've been for the last 6 months, and this is where we're going as a team. And so for everyone to be on the same page. And if we're talking about engagement, do you know how engaged people are when they know that they're a part of this? They feel like their role is really important for us to get to that next stage. So those are 2 ways. We also have every 2 weeks, because we hate meetings at TribalVision, just so you know. That's another tip, right? I can't tell you the number of organizations I'm in where like there's a 4-hour meeting and it should over a logo and it should be like 40 minutes. And they wonder why they're not growing very quickly. Okay, so but my point is, you know, those are just some very basic, so every 2 weeks we meet together as an entire team, including the young associates, including the interns. They hear full transparency from me, right? So they know exactly how they can bring us to that next level. Because it is about them, it's not about me. I'm 1 person out of 40 at this point. So just one example. At that bank that I was at, I told you about where I was a CMO, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you, there was probably $100,000 spent on this new brand, $100,000 spent on this new brand, and then at the very, and by the way, the person doing this, if you can believe it, was even a lawyer, but he was a young lawyer. And then they then realized after the fact, we couldn't use it. And we just spent and there's a lot of these types of instances. There are $100,000 spent on this. And now, you know the egg, forget about the money. Do you know the egg on the face of the marketing department? Because everyone thought it's marketing's fault. They didn't realize the inner workings of the business, that it wasn't us. But we should have thought about that, right? So ultimately, you've got to first start with the foundation, right? The foundation of everything. And oftentimes, business owners are impatient with this. The foundation has to be who you are, why you're doing it, what that color palette is, right? Get the logo and message right, and everyone's on the same page about that. And by the way, again, it sounds crazy coming from me, a marketer, but I'm a business owner before I am a marketer. That gives me an advantage, I think. I'm a blue-collar business owner. Or if someone asks me, what am I? I'm not a marketer, right? And don't spend 4 months on the logo, okay? Like, I understand the importance of a logo. I get that. I spent a lot of time on the TribalVision cute logo where you have interlocking people. That's my tribe, right? But I also didn't spend 4 months on it, okay? So a smart person once said, if there's a committee to do a logo, don't be on it. Focus on marketing. And now it can't be called Shit Bank, right? It has to be something that's reputable, and it has to tell your story. TribalVision tells a story. Vision is, I'm going to help a company go from point A to point B. That's vision. Tribal is about the wow. It's about creating a tribe instead of just customers. There's a story behind my name. Powerful name and logo is about being able to, within 10 seconds, like I just did, tell a story. That's it. As long as you do that and it's credible, move on to the next thing. Right? Too many times, everyone thinks they're a marketer, and it's very subjective at that point. Right? I mean, I can't tell you the number of times where you get the brother-in-law who now chimes in, and, well, my wife now has an idea and a thought, and she, you know, it's like, in the meantime, Rome is burning, and we're thinking about this for far too long. Right? So, again, it sounds silly coming from me, and like I said, it's important. Spent a lot of time on the name TribalVision, same with our clients. We work on this with them, but it shouldn't extend beyond what it should extend. And then let's use that as the foundation starting point to now build something special. It's the message that people should focus more on, right? Because that's where you're going to be able to differentiate yourself. So that's something that shouldn't be rushed. That's something where, and honestly, if the logo and the tagline are right, because there is a lot of thought put in, everything else should fall into place very quickly, right? If you're able to then start with that really important piece of the asset, everything else can flow message-wise if you get that right. And again, a lot of companies that don't have a marketing-centric focus, they're product-driven. They're, the operations guy who's grown up in the business, who's now the CEO, who worked the factory floor. He's not thinking this way, or she's not thinking this way, right? So, but yeah, there's got to be more marketing in that organization, so what you just said doesn't happen. So, absolutely. I don't know that answer, to be frank. So we're tracking in terms of visitors, but in terms of them, someone actually saying, I closed that deal because they read that, they listened to that podcast, I don't know. In terms of actual visitors to each of those, I do know that, right? So for me, it is the video testimonials where everyone goes to. It's not about even the company video. What it is someone saying, I'm that person. Like, my God, that person just said they need X. That's what I need. And he or she said, TribalVision helped me with that in a good way. So, yeah, again, content is so key. But if I had to prioritize, again, it would be the video testimonial section of the website. That being said, though, if you just heard what he said, right, we have everything. I'm not just saying I'm just doing video, right? We have podcasts, this video that's happening right now I'm looking at, putting that on the website. All of that is like so important, that type of content where everything helps. Right? I mean, guest columns. I mean, if you can, try and position yourself in your space as a bit of a thought leader. Trust me, it'll help you with your conversion into a sale. Right? So it's tough for me to put an ROI. I'll end with this because I know we've got to go. But when someone says, okay, well, why are you doing all of this? You really can't track it like I just said. I can't tell you exactly that I closed a deal because of that video. Right, but I can tell you that my close rates of converting a lead to a sale is far greater than the typical marketing firm. Why? Not because I'm brilliant or fun to be around. Right? It's because I've been able to, through all of the resources I provided on the website, find a pain point and then solve that pain point so that when that person's meeting with me, they've already almost made up their mind that you might be the right person for me because there's so much they've already read about what we can do for them with all the resources that I don't even have to go crazy with the full court press. I just have to just reinforce what they've already read on the site and rummage through. Because oftentimes, again, with us, right, it's not as if it's a widget that we're selling. It's $7,500 a month with TribalVision, right? It's a big decision. So, but oftentimes with all that content, it allows that person to say, yeah, I'm making the right decision, not just having to rely on the salesperson to try and close the deal. So, yeah, that's what all these resources are doing for me, to be frank.